implementation of a really simple tool that allows us to, basically edit a list, right? You could certainly extrapolate this of manipulating any type of list. Right? It could be just a to-do list. It could be a list of courses, a list of modules, a list of lessons, list of topics. It could be, anything, right? Anything that has it's an array of objects. Yes. Right? So let's look at the implementation. Notice the implementation needs a little bit of cleanup. Right. One of the things that we are doing here that is not kosher is that we are declaring all these variables in the global space, right? If there are typically in the when you're coding in JavaScript, usually you will be referencing lots of different scripts here, not only just these two, right? Certainly jQuery, it's its own thing, it's self-contained, but you in your user.js, you'll have lots of variables, and in other JavaScript, you'll have other whole bunch of variables, right? And in JavaScript, there's one single namespace, right? So you have to be careful that if you have all these files that you're loading and they're all declaring variables, they're all declaring their own functions, it could be you run the risk of some files overriding other files, right? That one function has the same name as some other function. Yes, right. So we have to avoid this collision, this name collision. Yes. So the easiest way to do this is to in users is to make all these variables private somehow, right? And say that these variables only exist, within the context of this file and nowhere else, right? Now, in plain old JavaScript, there is no support for things such as modules and importing and exporting. We'll see later on when we look at version 6. We will use importing and whatnot, but not just yet. All right, we're talking about just plain old JavaScript. There's no support for modules and exporting and importing, right? So the only way that we can make this private, right, and not litter the namespace, right, is to encapsulate this in a function, right? The function is the only thing that makes the innards opaque to the rest of the world, right? Any function that you create, there's no way to refer to things inside of the function, right? Unless the function explicitly binds it to itself, and then you can access it through the instance of the function. Yes, but typically any variables that you declare in a function are opaque to the rest of the world. Make sense? Right. So let's do that. Right. We want to make sure that everything we've declared here so far is not accessible from out here. Right. So we can declare this whole thing instead of a function. Okay. So we declare inside of a function. Maybe we give it a name, init. And then maybe we can call this function, and then it would do what it would normally do. It would run whatever that function does, right? So if we do that and refresh, right, it still works. Right? Everything works as just the same, right? So this is a lot better. We had, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 variables, right, that were at risk of colliding with other variables. Yes. Now we just have one. Right? We have this one function that is still declared in the global space. Yes, and chances are that it could, it's a little better than before, but still it could collide with other functions. Yes, how can we get around that? So ideally, this function would have no name. Ideally, this function would have no name, but if it has no name, there would be no way for me to invoke it. Okay. Ideally, this would be just a lambda. Right? And somehow it will be invoked automatically, right? Well, there is actually a way of doing this, and and it's a feature of JavaScript that the parentheses, the open close parentheses, it's called the invoke operator. It's an operator, right? It checks the type of the left-hand side and verifies, is this a function? If it is, I'm going to invoke it. I'm going to execute it, right? So we could use that. Right, the operator checks the type of what's on the left-hand side. So what we'd like to be able to do is remove init, remove the name init, and somehow add the parentheses like that, it checks to see, oh, the left-hand side is a function. I can invoke it without needing the name, right? All right, so we can put a parentheses here and a parentheses at the top, right? Okay, this is a design pattern. We can refresh, right? It still works the same. It's called an IIFE, an immediately invoked function expression, right? An IIFE. That's very common. You'll find this everywhere in JavaScript source. And the idea is to encapsulate, create a module, right? A self-contained module that does not compete with the rest of the namespace, right? Overriding, overloading, anything else. Now with ES6, with the new version of JavaScript, we have full support of imports, of exports, right? That make this less relevant. But all those new features in ES6 are not fully supported by all vendors, all right? We still need to use tools such as Babel and things like that that convert all those really cool new features into just plain old JavaScript. Okay, they compile, they transpile all those really cool features into low-level JavaScript, right? So when you open up all those low-level JavaScript that are generated, they're full of these, lots of ifs everywhere, right? To implement the modular features. Make sense? Right. All right. Excellent. There's also a whole bunch of things that we kind of skipped over with best practices. Notice that we have variables interspersed with for loops, interspersed with functions. Yes, right? Obviously, this needs to be reworked. Like variables declared at the top, functions declared at the bottom. Yes, right? And the assignment kind of walks you through the best practice on how to declare all these things, right? Here we're just looking at techniques. Yes.
So when we're creating this assignment, like, do you think we should do it like make everything static first and then slowly add in the dynamic pieces after we're done with like the layout and like styling?
Yes. Yeah, I would do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Because like you could add like instead of just adding like a UL, you would add like a whole div and a row.
Yes. Yep. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Sure. All right. Thank you.